but she has been fabulous. And I honestly, I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you how impressed I've been. I knew when we interviewed her and we hired her that she would be good. I was not aware on how quickly she would pick things up. So that is a public thank you to Megan for moving so quickly, but also she is doing a fabulous job, which is making things a little bit easier, especially in this kind of crazy time right now. So thank you, Megan.
Welcome, Megan.
Thank you.
Welcome, Megan, and thank you to Sophie and Mitch for that introduction.
I already said hi to Megan. Hi again.
All right. So am I tossing this to you, Sophie, or to Kyle? Item number 2.
That only works when we all see the same thing.
Yeah,
that would be me pointing
in my
to Kyle.
direction?
Yep.
So I'm going to try to share my screen. I'm not sure if this will work. Okay. All right, can everyone see the presentation? Good. All right, so this is just it's not really much of a informational presentation, as we went over a lot of that last time. This is just a couple of follow-up things in regards to the last meeting, and then as Megan mentioned, really starting to get more into strategy and talking about the public outreach process, and you know, what that might entail. Usually for an ordinance change that directly impacts certain neighborhoods in town or can affect a lot of people, we look to do some public outreach meetings, some community meetings outside of just the normal public hearings at the planning board or the council meeting. So first, I just want to touch on something. You know, last meeting, I had some data on MDR lots, lot sizes, and then after the fact, I believe some data was sent out to the council in Excel format. I just want to touch on, if people really dove in and looked at it, why there might have been some small differences in those two data sets. Though you can get information on GIS in different ways, and the way I obtained versus the way the Excel data after the fact was generated just used two different processes. And the data that came after the fact, it had one thing that caused a few more lots to show up in that data set was that there were some duplicate entries. So the data after the meeting was obtained by really intersecting our MDR zoning layer with our parcel zoning layer, or parcel lot layer. And because the way some of our backend parcel data is formatted, it counted mainly some of the larger lots in our GIS data. It counted these big lots as multiple lots. So the easiest way to see that would be with the example, the mobile home park on Forest Ave. In my data, I counted it as 1 4-acre lot. However, in the data that you got after the fact, it counted it as many different lots, about, I think, 31 lots, because it counted each mobile home as its own lot. The problem is it assigned the total acreage of the whole mobile home park, 4 acres, to each one of those 30 lots. So that kind of thing can skew the information. It kind of skews the total number of lots, as well as skewing the average or mean lot size if you bother to calculate those out. Secondly, It seemed to duplicate mostly the larger lots. This is probably because at some point there were divisions or subdivisions with those lots. And when the GIS data was being amended, somehow multiple entries were formed. So it turns out the second and the third largest lots in the whole MDR were both duplicated. So you added to that data set that you received an extra 45 acre and an extra 106 acre lot. So again, just, if you were looking to figure out of that data set how many lots are under 10,000 square feet, there wouldn't have been that much of a difference. But if you were doing something like taking the average square footage or the mean square footage of all the lots in the MDR in my presentation last time versus that data set, it might have been a little different. Also, whereas I was trying to count mostly just the residential lots and vacant properties, when you just take all of the MDR lots straight out of the GIS file, it accounts certain things that aren't used for residential uses and would never really be used for residential uses. For instance, the railroad, that runs along there, that's technically a lot that forms on our GIS. So I didn't count that in my information, whereas in the data set afterwards, it was counted because it was just picked up automatically. So it doesn't really change too much. The data was largely the same, but just wanted to point that out if anyone was really kind of calculating averages and looking at the total number of lots and wondering why there was a little bit of a discrepancy. Those are mainly the reasons. So last time we looked at, we talked about how, over half the lots in the MDR, about 600 of them were under what our current minimum lot size is. This was something I put together just to kind of show a little clearer of a breakdown. The number of lots kind of for every 5,000 square feet of lot size. So, this isn't really meant to make any specific point, but I just know it was a topic of conversation last time, and I wanted to provide a little more of a breakdown, where you can see the bulk of the lots in the district are, range from anywhere from 5 to 25,000, with a lot of lots being in that 10 to 15,000 square foot range. Another thing we spoke about last time was sort of establishing the boundaries of the village residential overlay district. If you remember, this overlay district is supposed to incentivize owner-occupied housing by allowing parcels that put a deed restriction saying that the property will be owner-occupied. It allows them to take advantage of a higher density, going down to 7,500 square foot minimum lot size. So this is the area that the comp plan looks at for that overlay. It's meant to be an area walkable to downtown. But at the same time, I know staff at the time was really trying to capture some of those undeveloped larger parcels that could really take advantage of the overlay when kind of developing any potential new neighborhoods going forward. So, in planning theory, a lot of times you hear a quarter mile or a third of a mile as far as that being the real walkable distance. Obviously, if you look at this, if you measure from the core of the downtown to kind of the farthest parts of this boundary, it's all under a mile, but it's more than that quarter or third of a mile type of thing. So, but I think as we go forward into the public outreach section, it's probably worth going forward with a bigger area in mind and seeing what those different neighborhoods think versus starting to narrow and close to the downtown and realizing there are a lot of neighborhoods as you branch away from the downtown that would have been interested in taking advantage of this sort of thing. So again, I mean, this is something that can be specifically kind of nailed down after public outreach. But if anyone had any key thoughts on, you know, why this is the boundary, you know, should it be bigger, should it be smaller? If anyone had any opinions on that, you know, we could obviously discuss some of that now. So, you know, moving on to the public outreach stage, I think, you know, we looked at the ordinance language last time. There are obviously things that still need to be figured out, some specifics that need to be nailed down. But in general, it seemed that the council was okay with the direction of the ordinance, and that, you know, reaching out to the specific areas of the community that would be impacted by each change is probably a step that we should be coming up on before, you know, the ordinance goes to the planning board and then eventually back to the council for adoption. So I just wanted to talk about, you know, the logistics of the public outreach, you know, how to go about this, because it's a little different than what we've done in the past. So, I mean, in the past, when you do more community outreach events and you're talking to a specific neighborhood, it's good to have, you know, small groups and get people in the room, and you can really develop that back and forth conversation. The situation that we're currently in, where we're not having any in-person meetings, makes that difficult. But at the same time, you know, this is the stage that we're at, and we probably don't want to put it off when, you know, we don't know when we'll be able to get those back to those in-person meetings. So, you know, the ordinance is split into the three parts: the village residential overlay district, the MDR lot size reduction, and the extension of the village commercial district down Mill Street on a conditional use basis. So right there, I feel like you have at least 3 different meetings. You have 3 different concepts to 3 different groups of people. But there are different ways to go about each one of those. So when you look at the village residential overlay district, you know, I can consider, you know, I thought of 2 different ways to really go about it. One would be more time consuming, but probably more in depth. And, you know, you get a little more of that small group community feel. If we broke out, you know, this map into different groups. So basically, you know, you'd have a south of downtown meeting and a west of downtown meeting and a Webster neighborhood meeting. You know, and you broke it down into, you know, 3 or 4 different meetings just for the village residential overlay. And that allowed to set up a Zoom call or something with each one of those neighborhoods to see. I don't know why that started happening. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, sorry. But yeah, so that would allow for a little more of that back and forth discussion, but it would be more time consuming. Option 2, hold a larger scale video call like we do with you know, our meetings like this, or the council or the planning board meetings, where, you know, I can make a presentation on the general ideas of the village residential overlay district. People can watch in time, and they're able to type in comments and questions as we go, and I can, you know, dedicate a specific time for that and responding to questions. This doesn't allow as much, you know, conversation between community members as maybe option 1 would allow, but, you know, it's also maybe a more efficient use of time, or faster if we're trying to, you know, move this along a little more. Next would be the village commercial expansion. This is, you know, the smallest area out of the 3 different things. So we'd really only be talking about changing the zoning of about 20 lots. So this one seems like it would be easy enough to do a video call where everyone was involved and everyone could speak to one another, even assuming everyone in that corridor all showed up to the meeting, which is, generally not the case. But, even if, we did get that, which would be great, we'd still all be able to participate together. Whether or not we'd want everyone to have the ability to speak, the whole meeting. And, I don't know if you might start getting into people talking over each other. It's not as easy when, you're on a video call as in person to manage that sort of thing. But I mean, I think it would certainly be feasible to develop some sort of method where, we kind of go one by one through the video call and, give each person a chance to speak on their opinions of the idea, and then allow time for feedback by other people in the meeting. So last is probably the most difficult one, which is the MDR lot size reduction, just because the MDR, we've talked about the number of lots in the MDR, 1,200 lots in the district. That's a lot of people. It would be really difficult to have a video call where all of those people are able to talk and discuss at one time. And even if you were to split it out, like with the overlay district, into multiple meetings, you would probably need a lot of meetings to be able to create calls where there were few enough people in there to really generate conversation. So the two options I kind of thought of for this one be, one, to create a pre-recorded presentation on the objectives of the change and any impacts that residents might find. Ooh. Sorry about that. I mean, this would allow, if we did it pre-recorded presentation, this would allow for posting of the video to kind of create it as a resource that could be shared and posted multiple times, and we could ask for comments at multiple times. However, you won't really be able to generate that back and forth discussion between community members, and you won't be able to generate an instant response between staff and the community. Option two, you could do like I was talking about with the village residential overlay, where you do a live Zoom presentation where members of the public can watch. They simply can't speak, but they can type in any questions or comments they have. And then that would allow staff to respond immediately, and it would allow for follow-up questions to be generated. But you do run the risk of a lot of people being in the comments of a call that size, and potentially discussions kind of going off track in the comments and kind of burying the comments that would be more useful.
Kyle, can I ask a question quickly?
Sure.
Can you go back to that last slide?
Yes.
I've been on larger Zoom presentations, and really the risk isn't that on option two, isn't that difficult to manage. A facilitator can manage that. But my question is, can you do both? Like do an option one and then follow up with an option two? Like that was what I was thinking, was a pre-recorded presentation, but then follow it up with, now that you've seen this, now we're going to meet and talk about it. Is that a possibility?
Sure. I mean, I think either way, I mean, I feel like you could also do option two, which would probably have that same presentation and then share that numerous times. I mean, I guess you could do that with the village residential overlay as well. But yeah, I think either way, post it.
I mean, there's some flexibility there. So yeah,
right.
I like these two. Thank you, Kyle.
Yep. Sure. But yeah, so that was pretty much it. Really, I just wanted thoughts on those. If the strategies seem completely off base, if anyone, like Cheryl, has any feedback they want to give that might be useful for me. Maybe people have experience now that we've been doing these Zoom calls for so long, they find certain types more useful. But sort of before that, if there's any additional information that you want staff to look at before beginning the public outreach process, it's probably something that'll take 1 to 2 months, depending on how many of the meetings we do and how many presentations I need to put together. So if there's any other information on this ordinance and this topic that we want to look at before beginning that process, that would be useful to know now. So pass it back over to you for any comment and discussion.
Okay. Do folks need Kyle to keep the next step slide up, or can we go back to seeing each other?
Go back.
We can go back. I'm good.
Okay.
So, so first, is there a need, does anybody need staff to gather additional information before we continue? I have something, but I want to give the floor over to other folks.
I think I'm good with what we've got so far. I mean, I feel comfortable sending it out to the public, and however that happens. I did like that the presentation idea, that the very last slide that we saw that I mentioned with Kyle was do an option 1 to have the presentation, but then do a follow-up if that's how we're doing our meetings.
It all makes sense to me. I mean, thank you, Kyle, as always, great work. And I like the options that we had for presenting. I agree with Cheryl's idea on the communication. That's always a concern for me, is like, how are we getting the information out there? Are we giving them adequate opportunity to respond and that kind of thing? So I appreciate that. I know also, just sort of commenting on this, the obvious, there was someone who did have a question. I don't know if there's going to be an opportunity for that question to be posed at some point. I don't even know if he's still on here, but anyway.
He left, Sam.
Yep. So, too bad.
So I think Kyle was on the right track, and his suggestions of how to get community involvement and input seem very reasonable.
Yeah, the only thing that I would ask is just, and I guess this is less about information to gather for council and more about work towards those public meetings, is I think, especially having watched Evan work on the Main Street overlay, and I sat in on, that was my first council experience, was to observe some of those public information sessions, and he handled them very well. But I know that it's so important for the residents to really get an understanding or a narrative around what it would be like to have these changes. So, for example, if we're talking about lot sizes, what does it feel like in a neighborhood to change it this way or that way, or to leave it alone? I mean, like, I think that it's sometimes easier for folks to wrap their heads around, how is this going to change my day-to-day life, or will it not change my day-to-day life, as opposed to numbers and some people love that. But I think that for these public information sessions, to get the most accurate feedback or the most helpful feedback from the public, maybe a narrative those experiences could be helpful.
Good point.
Yeah, I would certainly be developing new presentations. I mean, there are some visual and graphic aids that I put in the council presentations that I could kind of, duplicate and use in the public outreach process. But those presentations would definitely be like with the Park Street one, where we kind of created a visual guide to kind of coincide with the ordinance, be something similar to that. Because, yeah, I don't want to just show the ordinance to the public. And I mean, before I got into this field, I wouldn't have known, what all these lot sizes, you can't visualize that in your head all the time. So.
Yeah, the Park Street proposal just to see all that. I mean, that was what I was thinking of, is it was really great to be able to see what it might feel like if that were what Park Street looked like. And I know that watching Evan, I think that it struck me as an outside observer that one of Evan's frustrations in the Main Street presentations was that sometimes if folks couldn't quite wrap their heads around the numbers and the material, they would assume things about what it meant. And then he would kind of have to, you know, take time to deconstruct those ideas and say, no, 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 that's not what it would do. So yeah, just to make your life easier, I think it would be helpful. Does anybody else have any requests for more information before we talk about some of the other questions that Kyle posed?
Yes, I would love to see the staff prepare the economic analysis. So by lowering what the comprehensive plan suggested that we lower lot size. It gave a number, but it didn't, at least from my reading of the comprehensive plan, there wasn't a lot of research that described why, and that was still 6 years ago when that was approved. So there's now been a lot of data to show that lot size is one of the controllers that keeps development from happening. And certainly in our town, there hasn't been much development. And those who have purchased homes, I know I purchased a home here 20 years ago, and it took me 2 years to 19 and a half years ago. It took me 2 years to find that home, or year and a half, yeah, 2 years, because there's so few homes that are available at the lower price points. And so I'd like to prepare for our staff to prepare for the town why the lower lot size incentivizes people coming in and building, and how larger lot sizes makes it so expensive with the cost per square foot of new buildings. It makes it very expensive, and that's, I think, and the data shows across the country, why there have been so few developments in towns around the U.S. For houses that are for median and moderate income. And so that's really what we're missing here. Our comprehensive plan encouraged us to look for ways to increase the number of families that came here and increase the amount of housing for moderate income. And lot size may be the factor that really makes a difference according to the data across the country. So I'd like to see the staff present that information when they present it, because certainly those who say, I'm concerned about how this might change the way our town looks. You're right, Megan. I think it's a great idea to have visual of what that looks like. So I live in one of those neighborhoods that was developed, and the lot sizes are closer to 5,000 square feet. I have never had anyone come to my neighbor and said, oh my goodness, it's so tight here. This would be terrible. I wouldn't want to live in your neighborhood because there's not a lot of land around each house. People come to my neighborhood and say, how cute, how quaint, how nice. There aren't that many neighborhoods, maybe downtown, that has such a small lot size, but that would leave it up to developers to decide if we made a small lot size. So I'm just asking that staff would prepare that information as part of the presentation. I guess the other is, Kyle, you made a great presentation. Thank you. You gave us an A and a B, the A being that you would, option one, that would go to many different neighborhoods and have a Zoom meeting about each neighborhood, and the option two would be one large meeting. And I think that my experience of being on Zoom meetings is there's actually a hybrid, and what you proposed as having a recorded version of the general discussion would be helpful, because a hybrid meeting, people hopefully could have seen that recorded version before, but then you could do an abbreviation of that, and then we could break into groups based on the area and the zoning change that would be being discussed. So that way we could do breakout groups and come back together, and people, if they wanted to be in two different groups, could say, I'd like to switch from one group to another to be part of that discussion. And if we did that over many times, then it would allow our community to communicate with each other across neighborhoods, because some people who live in one neighborhood might be interested in what's happening in the downtown, and it would be a more fluid discussion. Hard to manage. I've been in Zoom meetings where it's very hard. People are not so great at managing breakouts. So it could be that it's too much because our staff hasn't done it. We might have to have a facilitator that would help us, or it may just be easier to do many meetings. But that would be a way to have meetings that lots of people could participate and discuss different topics.
Megan, may I ask a question?
I'm going to guess that she won't mind, Dave.
Lori, I want to clarify what information you're looking for. When you say the economics, can you give me an example of what the information would look like that you're looking for, please?
Well, if we lowered lot size so that people could develop where there's already streets and there's already public water and sewer, then instead of, so for example, if someone were going to develop somewhere and put in a road and then say to the town, we're going to develop it, but we want to deed that road over to the town, then the town has increased infrastructure that they'll have to maintain in the future. Versus if we lower lot size and existing neighborhoods are able to split, much as we've discussed already, and in one neighborhood in our town, we discussed lowering the lot size and allowing people to split the lot or make their building a duplex where previous zoning wouldn't have allowed that. In those cases, the cost for new infrastructure, zero, and the cost to maintain old infrastructure actually decreases per person because there's more people on that line. There's more people on that street. There's more buildings, basically more parcels that would be taxed. And so it's a way to increase the tax base in the area that's already has infrastructure. I don't know, I'm not an economist, so I don't know how you present that, but I know that is part of the discussion in words. I've heard that discussion of what's one of the benefits to everybody else in the town. So I grew up in a neighborhood that was built in the 20s, so just talking ancient history, but when I was a kid in the baby boom, and almost every house on the street was developed at the same time in the 20s. There was a big property that got subdivided in the 20s, and there was one lot that wasn't sold, and we played kickball there my whole upbringing, and we all felt like it was our public park, but it wasn't really a public park. It was just a lot in the neighborhood that all the kids played kickball. And eventually the people who owned that sold it because the zoning allowed them to sell that lot. And then a house was built there. And so I know personally the experience of having a house built on a lot that you felt like was an open lot that was your park in your neighborhood. However, that wasn't a public park, it was private land. I also know what was built there was a geodesic dome. All the rest of the houses were stone with slate roofs or Dutch colonial wooden homes. And so we were not pleased with the dome going in there. It didn't fit the nature of the architecture of the community. So I salute the discussion when I was new to council and there was this discussion of Main Street of talking about the architectural similarities to the houses on either side. So what I'm talking about is that kind of infill, that even though I grew up in a place where there was infill and we were all sad to lose our kickball field and the place that all the kids congregated, in fact, that infill didn't cost any more in infrastructure to the town, and the tax base from that property was a net positive to the support and maintenance of infrastructure in the town. And once the trees grew up around it, it wasn't such an eyesore.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to, Dave, I'm going to let you continue because you had questions, so go ahead.
No, I'm still struggling with what information that we need to provide. So currently our ordinance allows for cluster developments. So if you have a property that's 3 acres in size, you can create under the cluster development option, you can create properties, 4 units, I believe, per acre. 4 acre, am I right? Give me a heads up, Kyle. 4 units per acre. So that's about a 10,000 square foot lot. That was created as Evan created the cluster development out of the comprehensive plan project to do exactly that. Is that you would be allowed within in the MDR section. You're able to create more density there, more properties there to be able to take advantage of the municipal services, water, sewer, etc. So we have a system that allows that. What I'm looking for, and I apologize, Lori, if I'm not getting it. I just need to know what's the what's the question that we need to find an answer for? What information would you like to have that would help you make your decision?
The cluster development, you just said that it would be 4 units per acre, but they could be clustered close together, and then the rest would be open space, right? Is that what you just described?
Correct.
So, but the cost of the land, it means that basically each unit is getting a 1/4 acre worth of cost of land applied to that building unit. But if we lower lot size down to 5,000 square feet, and a 1/4 acre is a 1/4 acre is what, 20,000? 1/4 acres is 15,000 square feet.
It's around 10.
11,000.
11 and change.
So basically, I'm saying if I would want to know the economic argument for having what that Evan came up with something that is already having the 20,000 square feet that we have, right?
Right.
Bringing 20,000 down to 11. So, but even though he did that, we haven't seen cluster developments happen. Therefore,
That's
the cost
correct.
is obviously higher than makes it incentivized for the developers to do that here. And in other towns, developers are building clusters, and they're building the missing middle, which is maybe four unit properties, and we don't have any of that happening in our town. And so I suspect that the barriers, the economic barriers to those developments, are why we're not having them. There could be other barriers, but so if it were down to 5,000, which would mean there would be, as already Kyle mentioned, there's already a certain number of properties that are impacted by the fact that we made a change that allowed smaller lot size in one particular part of town. So if we brought it down to 5,000, and the other thing is we have a zoning that says houses have to face the street and have a certain amount of frontage. So there's still already, from the GIS, there's only a finite number of properties that could be subdivided and have houses on them if we keep the zoning that says a house must have a certain amount of frontage and face the street. So another way to get more development on existing infrastructure is to allow houses to face in an internal court, right? But I'm not even asking for that, although I think that's the next, incremental development. But as far as if you took it down to 5,000, how many units, how many houses could be built on existing streets, and then therefore the income, the taxes they paid is only a net benefit. It doesn't cost any more in infrastructure costs.
So is your question to Kyle then, how many single family homes could be created if you reduced it to 5,000? Is that what you're asking?
Or homes turned into duplexes if you reduced it to 5,000.
Okay.
I may be wrong. I'm trying to follow the conversation, but I think some of that information also depends on the value of the property to start with, and what's there. But it may be wrong. I mean, maybe you could give us examples, but I'm not sure if you can give us every property in the.
Well, if we're targeting that we want to have more homes that are, say, in the $150,000 range, so then this back of the envelope calculation is that all those homes that got built, let's say they're all worth $150,000, and so a home on land that's worth $150,000 has a certain amount of taxes because our tax valuation is based on the value of the property. And since we have had individual homes built, say since the 90s, that are in the much higher cost, what we haven't had in the town are homes that are built that are for private homes, unless they're individuals where, say, a home was burned down or a home got flooded when it was not being used and then molded and had to be knocked down and replaced. But we haven't had development of houses under the $200,000 range. So
Can I just jump in here? I apologize to everyone. My internet, for some reason, always wants to fail during council meetings. I'm back. So I missed some things, but can somebody just sort of concisely tell me what exactly it is? I mean, maybe Lori or somebody else can tell me, like, what exactly are we asking from Kyle in this section, more information that council needs? Just very concise, because I missed a whole bunch. So if you could give it to me in a sentence.
I think Lori's asking to just run the numbers to see how many properties could come up, could be added to the thing if we move down to 1/8 of an acre lot instead of where we are around 1/4 of an acre lot now. That's the general gist I'm getting, just to look at what that potential impact, potential growth could be. Am I way off base, or I've been trying to follow it too, and I've been.
But I'm trying to follow it too, but I'm wondering, I'm sitting here thinking that isn't this up to the property owner? Isn't this why we're doing isn't this why we're reaching out to the property owners to find out what they want? So I'm confused because we have to do the public thing first,
Well, I
and
guess
then decide. I gotta get out of the sun, and then start thinking about this. But if we're not talking about developers, we're talking about property owners who already own that property, and whether they want to subdivide their own property into 5,000 square foot parcels or 10,000 square foot or whatever we decide. But we have to talk to them first, is my understanding.
I think we need to talk to all citizens about, that's why I said I'm looking try to be concise, for the economic reason for allowing the lot size, for when we change lot size from 20,000, which that's why we're having this discussion, because there was the comprehensive plan said we should drop the lot size from 20,000 square feet. And so what I said is, if we dropped it all the way down to 5,000 square feet and allowed whoever owned that property or wanted to develop the property to decide how they wanted to use that property, and allowing it down to 5, that there would be an economic incentive for us, the town. And that's why every person in town should be involved in the discussion, because the economic reasoning is when you have a smaller lot size, then you can have more buildings, when you have more owned by private individuals, and when you have more lots, then you have more taxes coming in. When those lots are on places that already have infrastructure, roads, streets, public, sewer, that we'd have to pay to improve that infrastructure. And we have been conscientious, except for sometimes when we don't have money, we push it off a year, putting in roads. When we have a problem with our water, we fix it right away, but it's extra cost that we hadn't necessarily planned on. But if we had more people paying taxes on each of those lines of things we have to maintain, then that helps our economic position as a town.
Okay, if we're going to look at this sort of economic impact, I'm only going to encourage, let's look at all of it, okay? So it's great. This could generate more tax money. We could squeeze every bit of acreage in town to get every tax dollar we could out of it. But what is the impact going to be on the community? How desirable will that be if all of a sudden we have these communities and all of a sudden like 3 houses are turned into these little mini lots with mini houses on it? What's that impact going to be for pro or con, positive or negative? So we're going to look at economic impact. All of a sudden, we're opening up a huge project for Kyle to figure out what the potential negative impact could be too. How many people are not going to want to have that development? It's going to impact the valuation of their house, that sort of thing. I know you lived in a lovely lot, and I know you have a small little lot now, which is super cute. I've seen it. It's super cute. But not everybody wants that. And so there could be impact on that. So I think it's a gross oversimplification just to say, what is the extra tax money we can get if we squeeze it every bit as hard as we can to juice that tax money out? So if we're going to look at it, let's look at the whole thing. I think this is opening up a huge project.
So can I take a crack at this, and maybe we can get a shape to this conversation. So we're looking at village residential overlay, we're looking at the village commercial district expansion, and we're looking at MDR lot size. We have these 3 different things, and when we make a presentation to the public, we would like Kyle to include all of the information about potential benefits and then potential drawbacks. So for example, a potential benefit could be environmental or economic, but then there could be drawbacks to some of these changes. And then it's up to the residents of the town to decide whether the benefits outweigh the drawbacks or vice versa. If I'm accurately summarizing where everyone's at, please let me know, or if I'm not, but it sounds like that's what everyone's saying.
Yeah, yes, Megan.
All right, so that was only
A second. My concern, I think you summarized it well, Megan, but my concern is that we're not proposing 5,000 square foot lots in this community feedback. We're trying to get some information as to how community members feel about it. So I think we got to be careful that we're not presenting it in a way that, well, the town council has decided they want to have 5,000 square foot lots in the MDR, and now we're asking the community for some feedback on it. I don't think we've gotten to that point.
I wasn't saying that the town council was proposing it. I was saying that I was looking for that information because the last time we met, we started our meeting with the comprehensive plan says lower lot size might help us achieve these things that are goals in our comprehensive plan, including more density, so that and families being able to buy homes closer to the schools. And, you know, there was a bunch of things that were listed that would be a benefit of why we would want more houses walking distance to the schools. And published in 2014, and there haven't been any developments then, nor have I couldn't find any whole community developments that actually got built. We have one that was, the road was built, but not the houses, two. But so there's obviously it's what the developers tried to do hasn't been a net benefit because we didn't get more houses out of them. And we had developers come and ask us for some kind of abatement because they didn't get what they wanted, which was to make a living off of developing. So we haven't gotten what we want, which is more homes that are at a lower price point for our community. That's what our comprehensive plan says. So I don't know if 15,000 is what anyone would want. I'm just saying that from my reading, it's that of this issue across the nation, and then with these I read about 4 towns that were outside, that were basically on the urban-rural interface, and that 5,000, lowering it to 5,000 allowed each town to do whatever seemed right for that community.
Lori, can I just?
I just want to make sure the data is for the town.
Can I just interrupt because you have mentioned these few things a few times. I think we've read your emails and you have mentioned these specific times. So I just want to try to again bring us back to together. And I think what Tom seems to be saying is something that I was trying to get at the beginning of the meeting, which is we're not dictating to the town, this is what we think, without input. So before we maybe when we have these public meetings, maybe everybody will clamor for smaller lot sizes and we'll say, okay, we've heard you. Now we'll talk to the town planner about what that might mean and how that would work. And then we can go back to the public. But the point is that we need to do information gathering from people first, I think is the point that Tom is trying to make. And that's the point I was trying to make at the beginning of the meeting. We have to talk to the community about what we are trying to do, which is address something the comprehensive plan recommended, which is smaller lot sizes. In this particular instance, we're talking about a lot of other things too, but we ask them for feedback and then we proceed on in a direction based on public feedback. So we're putting the cart before the horse. We're not quite at the point where we can argue about lot sizes because we haven't heard from the public yet.
I was answering your question, which you said, what else would you like our town staff to prepare for these meetings? And I said, what I would like them to prepare. And Tom said he didn't want people to think that was the whole committee. And I said, it's not, it's me responding to your question, which is if we're gonna have public meetings to educate the town and the people in the town about this issue, what else do we need to tell them? And this is something I would like to be educated by our very town staff.
I guess I'm still, I don't know. I guess I'm still not.
But yeah, Lori, I'll just step in. We don't have a clear question. So I liked what Megan had proposed about feedback as here's some potential positives and here's some potential negatives. And so if we just address it that way, because I don't understand what the actual question is either. Like, what are we trying to ask that we're going to actually present? Are we asking how much it's going to cost to put up a house, you know, with all of the, with the infrastructure in place versus I mean, it's too complicated. So why don't we just do the positives and the negatives and, you know, present that way? Here's potential, and let's get feedback, because I feel like we're just spinning wheels right now. So let's just get feedback, and then we can start honing it a little bit.
Can I jump in real quick and just ask Kyle a question? Kyle, given that you just witnessed this whole exchange here, is there a general easy direction where you think you might be able to glean some information? I have no idea.
So I think we've loosely, so in general, we've talked about the benefits of decreasing lot sizes, that, you know, you can rely on build infrastructure, and, you know, having smaller lots leads to purchasing less land. So it's cheaper to develop for individuals, and you're closer to public transportation and existing businesses. So we've talked about some of those benefits loosely. I could certainly develop a presentation for council speaking more to, more specifically to the benefits and negatives of reducing further. I think that in the comp plan, it mentioned 15,000 square feet because at the time of the comp plan, there was some discussion in the community. There was outreach done at the time, you know, that generated that number. In combination with the MDR reduction, there was this idea of the village residential overlay. And that's when the lot size started to drop down more to 7,500 square feet. And that was an easier thing, I think, to sell during the outreach process for the comp plan, because it was specifically for owner-occupied lots. Whereas if you talk about, when you talk about reducing the lot size in the MDR across the board, you're not just talking about owner occupancy, you're talking about rental properties too. And you're talking about adding in, you know, a lot denser rental housing, which opens up the conversation of student housing, which has obviously always been a topic of, you know, hot button topic in the town. So not that that's, you know, an impossible conversation to have, or, you know, not that it's a bad thing to necessarily increase rental opportunities as well. But I do think that when you're talking about reducing the lot size across the board and not having some requirement of owner occupancy, then you are opening up a much larger conversation with the community, and there should probably be an additional, some additional conversations between staff and council before we brought that to the public, to kind of, you know, find some balance. If there's a difference in opinion now versus when those ideas were brought to the comp plan several years ago.
Thank you, Kyle.
So another thing that Kyle had asked about in the presentation was around sort of how do we approach the process of public information gathering, and he presented several different options. And I know things have changed in the world of Zoom, but I'm very curious to hear from some of our vets, Tom and Sam and Cindy, who've been through a few neighborhood meeting scenarios in your tenure. Do you feel like any particular approach, forgetting about Zoom for a minute, any particular approach is more effective than another? Or, because I've seen some of these happen in real life, but you've seen more than I have.
Sorry about that. Oh, Cindy, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm having technical difficulties today. I think it's going to have to be kind of a hybrid approach. I think you want more input from the public than you do from council if it's supposed to be kind of a listening session. But I really do think that creating the parameters of, you know, this is what we're talking about, lower lot size, or changing, putting the village overlay, or I think it might help to have one topic at one time. And maybe after a presentation have allow public comments over Zoom. I don't know. I don't like that, but I don't know. We got an option.
I think that's where we are, though. And I think, from my experience, it's been, and it doesn't matter. I mean, in person, I think is best. That is not an option necessarily right now, clearly, and who knows when it will be again. But the main thing is what works best, in my mind, is when we present the information, first of all, and we're clear, we are presenting the information. Everybody watch, everybody listen, okay? And there will be a time for questions. People want to be heard, but if they come in without understanding, if they come in just hearing the title of something or some, catchy title, they'll come in with guns a-blazing, because, that's when you get torches and pitchforks, and which is a term of endearment, by the way. But it's a matter of, we say, this is kind of the topic, this is the overview. Kyle is a master of this. The presentations we've had in other neighborhood programs have been very clear, very respectful, and just simply laying it out. And then sometimes here's option A, B, and C, or whatever, but we can do that. And then we can say, now we're just gathering information. And Kyle is also a master at taking that information and synthesizing it and following up with it. So I have complete faith in Kyle and this, but I think the format, be it in person or in Zoom, for that matter, I think there could be some creative ways to do it too. Create a document or maybe a PowerPoint that could be shared, or record something like we said, and have that, and then have people watch it together, whatever, form their questions and come back. But in a matter respectful and with no sort of, jack-in-the-box surprises coming up. I mean, it's a matter of really getting that information out to them really clearly, but just presenting the overall issue. People need to know what they're talking about, what's being discussed, and then get their input. They want to feel like they're heard.
So, Sam, I agree with you. It's going to be important, the information that people get before they have an opportunity to provide input. And if it's not at the same time as the opportunity to provide input, I think we're going to have to frame the session with a summary of that material, because there's not going to be any guarantee that everybody has watched the input in a separate session prior to their opportunity to speak.
Does anyone else have any stray thoughts about the options?
I'm still, oh, go ahead, Terry. Did you want to go?
I've been trying to get in here, but this is going to play right into my concern about why I think maybe having smaller groups, because monopolization of conversations. It's hard to get a word in, even in this group, at times. And I worry about that based specifically on certain neighborhoods are going to have different feels about what's important to them in their neighborhood. My neighborhood's going to be totally different than Sam's neighborhood. And I think that we should really look at having a more smaller, I know it's going to take more time, but smaller conversations with those groups to allow voices to be heard.
Yeah, that's my inclination as well, is that there's a big difference between neighborhoods and what folks like. So
yes, there's a big difference in neighborhoods, and if you ask anyone if they want their neighborhood to change, for the most part they say no. And so I think if you set it up where you're talking in neighborhoods, then you're setting it up so that things will not change. And I think our job as leaders is to chart the future, and the future is to try to be better than the past. And the past has been decades of very tight housing, very hard to buy a house in Orono. Houses prices driven up so that if you buy a house in Orono, you're actually paying more per square foot than in Veazey, than in Bangor. It's great because we have people, me included, who, when my real estate agent said, you could buy the same house in Bangor, we have people who say, no, I'll pay more because I want Orono. So we have great people who live in Orono and people who have already decided to pay the higher taxes, to be in this fabulous town. However, we have had decades of having the town be prohibitive for lower income people to buy into. And that's not leading for the future. Leading for the future is making this town more accessible, bringing more people in, encouraging more density, encouraging people to use public transportation and to walk. And this is our chance to be leaders about that. So I am against the idea of having meetings only in little neighborhoods and not across the whole.
So, Lori, I would just say be very careful about how that's worded, because I don't want you to ever go out and imply that we are not individuals on this committee or in this council that are not forth-seeing and looking to the future, because that's simply not correct. Your idea of what you think this town is your idea, and I'm not going to own that idea, and I'm not going to discount your idea. But I will say that my neighborhood is definitely going to be more interactive and understanding if it was just us here talking and a more close thing. You don't have to agree with that. I'm just saying that that's what I believe is right, and I don't want you to imply that if we don't go that route, that we're people who are not looking to the future. So please be careful of that.
I'd also like to add thank you, Terry. I agree, and I'd also like to add that I'm a person who grew up poor. And I'm still poor, and I do care about housing for lower income people. And I really, really reject and I'm actually offended by the implication that the rest of council does not care about housing for low income people because you've decided that that's how we feel. I had this conversation at the last meeting. I'm going to reiterate it again. Please do not put words in the mouths of other councilors. We all care about these issues. We're all trying to find what we think might be the best way to approach the issues. You know, my personal feeling is that it's not my role as a counselor to dictate to the public what will happen to their property. And I also feel that if you really have what you believe is the right idea and you can't sell it to the public, then you're not doing your job well, because the best way to make change is to get buy-in from as many people as possible. And what's going to create buy-in? Convincing folks that it would be a good idea to make changes, or to simply tell them that we're going to make changes and we don't care what they think about it? I mean, that's my opinion.
So just to chime in on this conversation, I would much prefer to have neighborhood opportunities for feedback.
I think it's great to have neighborhood. I don't want to lose the opportunity that we all talk together, because I think that if we talk in neighborhoods, that's going to be great for the neighborhood. And the general will be, we like our neighborhood the way it is. I like my neighborhood the way it is, right? And I told you, growing up, we liked our neighborhood with an empty lot next door.
Yes, yes.
We were sad when it developed. So if you asked us, we would have all said that we didn't want that development. But we want all of the people in the community to be able to look from the view of the whole community, the benefit to the whole community and the opportunity. So we as a town council can't tell anyone what to do on their property, but we can reduce the limitations of what they could do on their property in hopes of meeting those goals that have been set for us by all of the town people who worked on the comprehensive plan and all of the town people who elected us to come to the council and to have these discussions.
I think you can and somehow do both. I think you can get, I think the neighborhoods are important to come in and have their say together. I think they feel more comfortable. That's one thing I noticed is a lot of times when you get a huge crowd, a lot of times people don't want to speak out. They don't want to be seen as the person saying something. They'll be more comfortable in a smaller setting. You can do both, but also a lot of times you get some real honest and actual information that's useful from these little neighborhoods that they're not just looking to protect what's theirs. They're not just, like trying to build a little wall and not let anybody come in. I think a lot of times they have insight. They have insight about drainage. They have insight about, water impact and soil and that sort of thing, because they live there and they experience it. And sometimes they know what an impact of higher density would be if we choose to listen to them, which I certainly hope we do. But otherwise, I think, this is a complex thing, and I think we're kind of close to this whole thing. I think some things are just being represented in a way that aren't being received the way they're intended necessarily. I certainly hope that's the case. But I think we just need to be, I think out of respect for the neighborhoods, I think that's important. We are a community of neighborhoods, not a community of developers. So I think it's important to remember that, and out of respect for them, get their input first, then we can have a larger discussion as well if we need to. But this is going to be, death by Zoom meeting again.
to try to get us back on track, as is my job as the chair of this committee, and to bridge us into the next item. You know, I want to say that it sounds as though the overwhelming opinion of council in terms of feedback for Kyle is that we are interested in getting feedback in smaller neighborhood groups. I will say that, you know, we're talking about the Saylor development next, and I certainly understand the point that Lori's making about townwide feedback because, for example, what happens in the Saylor lot doesn't maybe affect my day-to-day life in terms of my neighborhood, but it does affect my tax base, right? And that's one of those arguments that folks have had about the Saylor development, just as an example, because we're about to talk about it next. You know, so what our job as council is to gather the information, to listen to the people whose lives are going to be impacted immediately because it's their neighborhood where they live, take that into consideration, and then also take into consideration some of the larger issues that affect the town overall. That's our job. It's a balance. And so I'm interested in balance, and it sounds like the majority of council is as well. So we've given Kyle the feedback, I think, that he needs on this point. And so I would like to first ask Kyle, do you feel like you have everything that you need? Is there anything else before we move on to Saylor?
Yeah, I think so. As far as the public outreach goes, I think I'm aware. I just want to clarify, you know, before starting the public outreach process, is there anything else that council as a whole wants me to bring back to the next committee meeting? Or should we start actually engaging the public and setting those meetings up and developing the outreach materials?
It sounds as though the majority of folks have said that they're ready to get some feedback from the public, if I'm accurately interpreting the larger.
Great. All right, thank you.
So item number 3 is an update on Saylor development use of town-owned land. Is this you, Sophie, or Kyle again? We should have intermission music for.
Yeah, that would be great. So this is just a brief update. Not much has changed since we last spoke about this last, I think, fall or early winter. But just kind of to bring it back to the attention of council and where we're going to go moving forward. So the last that we talked about the Saylor neighborhood and the idea of potentially, you know, connecting the road and, you know, how to best utilize the town-owned land in the neighborhood, potentially having a plan where, you know, you connected a road, added a couple houses, added some community amenities, playground, walking path, things like that, allowed an option for some of the existing property owners that fronted on the town-owned land to possibly purchase some buffer areas for their property. You know, those were all ideas that came out of that neighborhood feedback. And the next step that we landed on was reaching out to the town engineer, Oliver Associates, to figure out what the cost would be for the town to develop a feasibility study for kind of for a concept plan and for the different development options. You know, I mean, as you get kind of in back of the neighborhood, there's some existing environmental and natural areas that bring in some concerns. The middle existing area between the neighborhood is also a little bit wet, as was pointed out during the neighborhood process. Sophie, yes.
So I'm going to ask kind of an unusual thing, but again, here we are in the Zoom landscape. If council and our participants who are watching, we would like to end the meeting and log back in. We've had a participant who's made a poor choice and is using racial slurs in the chat. So in order to wipe that slate clean, I'd like to end this meeting and then reestablish the meeting. So everyone should be able to follow the link they already have once we've left the meeting. Oh,
wait, Sophie needs, yep.
All right.
Are we switching?
Sophie, is there something?
Yeah. All right. I just blocked the people, but I don't. Yeah, this is.
It appears
This
there.
is- Yeah, sometimes this happens during Zoom, so we need to get off and start again.
Okay, let's do that. I'm
right.
gonna try again. I don't know if I'll get the Facebook piece correct, but let me try.
All right.
So you want us to log out?